do that, más educada.
That's just the campaign that Medellin is using to try and reform themselves. I wrote that because before on the board, anything other than nothing that was written was cocaine and drugs, and I think that's really easy to notice, like the first thing about Medellin, and that's the first thing we all learned, was that it was so violent. But if you spend any time looking into the city at all, you'll see that it's really a lot more than that. It's more than Pablo Escobar and cocaine and violence.
And my second annotation was a blog post from a sindicalista. I think they lived in the comunas, and they were basically detailing the history of the introduction of the paramilitaries, and basically from the late 90s to the early 2000s, and their effect on the people there, just the way that they came in with, originally with a mission in mind for peace, but ended up terrorizing people instead, which I found interesting to see like their whole idea of trying to change the situation, and they ended up making it worse, so they ended up basically adding to the problem.
Oh, am I talking? Okay. Well, I already talked about Fernando. Well, I'd say the whole kind of art aspect is something different, because a lot of the things that we know, and especially the first day, was drugs and cocaine. And kind of comparing, I thought it was interesting to compare what's popular and what's successful in Colombia from a Colombian artist, and kind of compare it to the work we see here in the United States. And the artwork, it's a little different. Like I said, he builds just these giant, massive sculptures, and he just throws them out there. And one sculpture I thought was very interesting was the Bird of Peace. And he built like an original bird, and it got blown up, and he suggested to leave it there for a monument to stability. And he ended up building one like right across from it, and I found this really cool picture online where there's the two birds are standing right next to each other, and there's the built one, the nice one, and then there's the one that's completely destroyed. It's still up there, but the base is there, and you can make out the bottom of the bird. And I thought that was really cool, and I don't know if something like that would have worked out in any other place where he builds another one and this time it's left alone. And I think that just shows you the progression they've made, and just how it's really interesting that this isn't like a one-time thing. He's out of office now, and it's still, like, they've still done all this great stuff, and it's not seem to be going down real anytime soon.
I think that, like, we take a lot of that for granted. Like, we don't really think about where things came from for us. Like, you know, if you think about coffee and bananas, like, Colombia has so many major exports, and, like, I mean, now we know more about it, and we're more aware of, like, how Colombia affects us in our lives daily, instead of, like, it just being over there and we're over here.
From what I studied, Colombians place a high value on women who are very beautiful, and women who don't measure up to that standard are sort of pushed to the wayside. And I just think, I think while that's true everywhere, I think in Colombia it especially stood out to me as being extremely prevalent to judge someone based on their looks.
There's a student who isn't here presented on a philosopher in Medellin, and then the memoir of an indigenous woman trying to negotiate indigenous with urban 19th century city life. I thought those sources were sources that are not generally covered when you're talking about Colombia, so I thought that was interesting. And then the myriad of sources. We have 108 annotations total with 54 students, and we have 300 different bibliographic entries. The students here have done a phenomenal job in their first year at Emerson College in compiling a mass array of information and doing so in a critical way.
Isn't it interesting to see the outsider-insider perspective, or how do you feel that was different?
I don't know how I expected to learn anything from someone who didn't know, someone who was just observing. I can easily observe and say, oh, well, who would want to go to Colombia for a beach resort type of vacation. It was the wrong approach, and I think that that's part of the process of this assignment and this whole project from the standpoint of us as students. You know, we're not only learning about a culture that is, I mean, in a lot of ways very different from our own, but we're just learning how to be better students.